right. Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, it's kind of a nice, easy, calm Tuesday for us. We're going to call it, we're going to talk about the O Tuesday. And then we also have a guest, Patty Traina, is going to be joining us. But first off, how you doing? Since our last episode, by the way, which tons of views both on YouTube, Spotify, all that stuff. It's been watched quite a bit. Not a lot's happened since, but where do we stand? But how are you doing, and where do we stand?
I think you can tell the tension level is rising among the Giants loyal fan base, because both on BBI and on X and other places, I detect I detect tempers are getting a little short. So I think it's
Makes
starting to
sense.
dawn on people that we're in a good spot at 3, but we're not in an ideal spot at 3. So people,
Right.
again, we're going to get, it depends on how you feel about the quarterback. That's a whole other question, Shador. But you're either going to get Shador or you're going to get Carter or Hunter. And that's not a terrible spot to be, but people have strong feelings on the quarterback, and some people have strong feelings on Hunter and Carter. So it's people are starting to realize we're not going to get the perfect scenario here. We're not going to get Cam Ward. That's not going to
Right.
happen.
Right.
And I think there's a there are people out there on social media in particular that have set their hearts on getting Cam Ward. And as that becomes clearer by the day that we're not getting him, those people are getting upset. So, I mean, I think it's all but given, unless the Titans are doing a epic con job here.
Right.
They're
Right.
taking Cam Ward, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we've got to, if you want a quarterback and you want Shador, you got to pray the Browns don't take him. And a lot of people are starting to think the Browns are going to take him. And if you want Carter or Hunter, then you're fine with that scenario, because then you're going to get Hunter or Carter. So that's where we are right now. Is I think the tensions are so, and we're still a month away. So I expect people are going to get a little feisty. Let's put
Well,
that.
and then there's that piece that we've talked about just incessantly over the last month, last 3 weeks for sure. And that is the Aaron Rodgers piece just does not go away. We had mentioned it, that there is a possibility we still thought he might come visit the Giants, even if it's just to raise the stakes with the Steelers. And now you're hearing a little bit of rumors that he may be coming to visit. Now, the one thing that's interesting to me that we'll get to here in a second about the visits that's going on, and it's who's gone to visit. But based on the fact that the bulk of the Giants management staff is not at Giant Stadium right at the moment, you really doubt that Rodgers would be coming to visit the next few days. Now,
That's a good point.
when they
Everyone's
get
at the pro
back,
days right now.
right?
Everyone's at at
If
different pro days, but they're all at the pro
if
days.
we suddenly hear that the Giants contingent is back home and there are pro days lined up, then something might be going on. I'm curious though, based on who we knew was gone and who wasn't necessarily at the Miami pro day. What's your thoughts on the fact that the Giants had a lot of Joe Shane, you had I think it was Tim McDonald's there, but you don't have Brian Daboll there. Why
I
not?
I think it's just an indication they realize that he's not going to be there for them. But it is a little bit interesting. So I don't know if what other pro days were going on that day. There were couple today, and the Giants split up to handle those. I think both our offense and defensive coordinator were at Texas today, and Shane was in Louisville, which
But where's Daboll
today
in general? We haven't heard where he is.
maybe they have him locked up.
Well,
I don't know. Where's
the other thing is,
Neal?
if if you want to create rumors, if if Aaron Rodgers is supposedly in New York right now, visiting his home in New York, that is the most recent rumor. If Brian Daboll didn't go anywhere and he stayed behind, well, there might be a reason why he stayed behind. I'm just putting pieces
It's
together.
not a bad thought. You're right in this sense. I'm trying to go through it. Again, I am not paying attention to every pro
Pro
day,
day,
and
right?
I'm only the ones that I see cross my Twitter feed I've noticed, but you're right. Dable hasn't been spotted. At least I haven't seen him in my.
I
And it's
haven't
not
heard
like
anything
you
about
haven't
him.
spotted him either, huh? Well, that's
Might be
something to keep. That's something. Well,
might be a good question for Patty when she comes on if she has heard.
all right, and I don't want to make the Rodgers show because we spent too
Sure,
much
we've
time
done
on
it
it.
a
But
lot.
Rodgers went to Pittsburgh, stayed 6 hours, left, did not sign a contract. Steeler fans right now have got to be like, what's going on? Either, some of them don't want him, but the ones that do want him are like, what the hell? What are you waiting for? So, what is he doing? Is he going to visit the Giants? We speculated even if he's not interested in signing here, he will visit either to drive up inflate his ego or drive up a price on a contract, or just stay relevant somehow. So we speculated that it would not surprise us. We said in the last show, it would not surprise us if he visits the Giants. There's nothing out there, but that's an interesting thought, John. Where's Brian Dable and where's Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers?
I mean, you
So,
would think if even if you didn't think you could get Ward, right?
right,
Shane's there. Why wouldn't Dayball be there? Wouldn't you want an eyeball test on the guy who's considered the top quarterback before you go to Colorado later to see the next quarterback?
right,
Don't you want to have that? You would want your coach to have that. I mean, he met with Jaden Daniels, right? We knew we weren't going to get Jaden Daniels, but he met with him.
right.
So you met with Drake May. There was a good possibility we weren't getting Drake May, but Dayball spent a lot of time with him. So why wouldn't he be at Cam Ward's deal, especially if the Giants are still trying to trade up? And if you're going to go look at Shador early April, I think it's the 4th, I believe, April 4th, is his pro day. If you're going to be doing that, why wouldn't you want that comparison just so you can go and see the difference of the two? Or maybe you go to see Jackson Dart, and I want to see another guy, and I don't know when their pro day is, if it's already happened. I don't remember. I didn't keep track of that. But we just haven't heard Brian Daboll anywhere. So here you are at Texas, right? I saw a
Right.
post that someone said, well, the Giants are looking at another quarterback. Well, maybe yours might be being looked at by Kafka, but you sent Bowen. So more than likely you're paying attention to some of the defensive players there at Texas.
Right.
But where's Brian Daboll? He's not in Miami. He didn't go to Texas. Those are two of the big name programs.
Where's Brandon Brown too? Have we seen him mentioned? But again, we might not be seeing everything too.
I thought he was in Miami
He
too.
might have been.
But you
There was a big contingent in
Yeah,
Miami.
there was a large group. But again, it's weird. It's just
Because
weird that
John, they have a
Daboll's there.
secret deal with Aaron Rodgers already, and they're just keeping it quiet until after the draft, so we can throw out the smoke screen that Shador's our guy. That's what's going on. Somebody's thinking that. So,
Yeah, I'm sure. I wonder this. I'll say, because now you hear the talk that the Giants basically had decided two veteran quarterbacks. That's the rumors that you're now hearing. They had decided two veteran quarterbacks, and one of them could still be Rodgers. It doesn't sound like Russell Wilson is in play here. If anything, it might be Flacco after the fact to Winston. But it sounds like Winston's deal, and everybody keeps kind of pointing it out, that it's really set up as a backup contract. Carl Banks has made a big deal to call it was a backup deal. Other people have made a comment that it's a backup deal per se. He might end up starting, but
I
the way
thought Banks was kind of defending the fact that he's not just a backup. I thought Banks was going in the other direction.
he defended the fact that he picked a spot early with the opportunity, but that overall he was saying, I think he was going from a position, some of the things he was saying was a position that he can't really speak to, which is Winston had these other opportunities. Why would he take this as a backup? And I'm thinking, how do you know he had all these other opportunities? The number of positions for starting quarterback are
Right.
down to essentially two teams, the Giants and the Steelers, because the Browns aren't going to re-sign Jameis Winston, or they already would have. He was with
Yeah.
them last year. So
It's the same point that we were making with Wilson. How
with
good
the
is
Steelers,
Wilson
right?
if Pittsburgh doesn't want to resign? Well, how good is Winston if Cleveland didn't want to resign him? So it's the same.
Yeah, it's basically musical chairs of back
Yeah.
quarterbacks. But anyway, that's where we are. So it's weird. I would like to know where Brian Daboll is. That's a very interesting. That's a big name guy, a number one pick more than likely, at least the number one quarterback in this grouping as far as most people believe. And your head coach, a quarterback whisperer, wasn't there.
Well, and we've been told it's between the Giants and the Steelers, with maybe the Vikings, and the Vikings supposedly aren't interested. But if it's between the Giants and the Steelers, and he hasn't signed with the Steelers, you would have to think he's going to meet with the Giants. And if he's going to meet with the Giants, it doesn't have to be public. So, like you said, your spidey sense might be onto something here. So, um, good thought. So that's
The
something to keep in
the
mind.
other quarterback thing, I saw a couple of posts, take them with a grain of salt. But there's a lot of talk that Kirk Cousins doesn't want to waive his no trade clause until after
Yeah, I
the
saw that.
draft.
Yeah,
And makes sense. He doesn't want to go
he
to a
doesn't.
team
He
like he
wasn't
did with Atlanta and then they go draft a guy.
exactly.
So
So he won't
he's
want to be traded to the Giants if they draft Shador. He doesn't want to do that. And I don't blame him.
he's a sneaky one to Minnesota. If Minnesota's not 100% comfortable with JJ McCarthy going in as the starter with basically coming off a knee injury and not playing any downs last year, Cousins back to Minnesota makes a whole lot of sense if they can get him on the cheap.
Right, right. And the last thing on Wilson, there were two asshats on the site who have sort of confirmed what you and I had said previously, that we don't see a real interest in Wilson here anymore. So there are two, Giant Grit and Brandon Walsh, both said, again, take it with a grain of salt.
Sure.
No one has to pay attention if they don't, ass hat warning, you don't have to listen. They've said Wilson's not part of the plan. And that seems to also go in hand in hand with Paul Schwartz, who's usually the Giants' mouthpiece in the media, coming out and publicly saying something that he normally doesn't say, these types of things, that the Giants prefer Winston over Wilson because they felt Winston would be better in the locker room than Wilson would be. So you're sort of dissing the other guy. And
Right.
again, it's not a kind of thing that you would expect. You expect that maybe from Pat Leonard, but not from Paul Schwartz. So I might be proven completely wrong here, but I don't see them bringing Wilson on board. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're bringing a second veteran in, I don't see why you'd bring Wilson. You'd either bring Wilson or Winston, but I don't see why you'd bring. And then the other thing is you're creating another quarterback controversy because you're going to have people out there, because they're relatively, some people are going to disagree with this, but it will start a fight because we've seen it even already in BBI. Some people will want Wilson to start and some people will want Winston to start. And as soon as the starter struggles, there'll be a call to bring in the other guy who's, again, a lot of fans think are sort of on the same plane. So you throw the rookie on top of that if you've got a rookie calling people. So you'd start a three-way quarterback controversy. I
Right.
don't see
Right.
the upside to that. I mean, if
It,
unless you want to get Dable fired, that'd be a
but
great way to get
you,
Dable fired. Is
you don't
start a
really have to
quarterback.
do a whole lot
Yeah,
for that to possibly
yeah.
happen. Just keep going with Tommy DeVito. You'll be
So
no
we've got
problem.
a number of questions
Yeah,
from
let's do
fans.
something.
Yeah, Thomas G asked us, it's a really good question. Does it make sense to add another running back prospect on this team through the draft? And you and I have talked about this a little bit before, and I think it does, especially given this draft.
Oh yeah, I totally am on board with that. I've done a number of PFF draft simulators, and as you're going through in the fourth, fifth, sixth round, there are still guys there worth taking. I would like to see a guy come in who's a bit of a different style or
Oh, sure.
a different body. So one of the guys out of Michigan, I think is it Martinez out of Miami. They're a little bit bigger, a little thicker guys. I want somebody who can pound when you need to. Counting on Eric Gray to be anything other than what he's been so far seems kind of like a Gary Brightwell situation. When you go, you know what I mean? Like you go a
Yeah.
couple. Brightwell was thrown on special teams. He got to play a little bit here and there, but really never saw the field, and then just was gone. And I got a feeling that Gray's going to be that kind of guy too. If they could find somebody that they could really trust, Gray doesn't have a spot on this team.
Yeah, and it's a really deep draft at running back. So you can get probably somebody who could compete for playing time, like you said, in the fifth round.
Yeah.
So I mean, running backs tend to fall anyways, and I think they're going to fall, especially in this draft.
And
But I agree with you.
it's a pretty deep group too.
Yes.
So I think you'll see you said fall, and I agree with the terminology, but I don't know if they'll fall necessarily because of talent,
No, no,
but
no, no. I
because
meant
no no no
because
no,
the volume,
oh, agreed.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a number of them, and I think some of the other positions there's a scarcity of top offensive tackles. There's a drop after the first group, and then you can get some guys in the middle that you could develop. So tackles might go earlier than some of them probably should because there's only so many of
Yes.
those guys. There seems to be a lot of interior offensive linemen, and that could jumble things up. And then you've got a number of defensive backs for teams that may have lost some guys and are going to have to go the youth movement. There's a number of those guys. So I think the running backs are going to be kind of, there might be a couple early. One Genty is going to probably go
Right.
very early, but then I think you're going to get, second to fourth round. There's going to be some big time quality players. And some of those other guys you were talking about, they're the ones who have that little thing that, maybe they don't have this, or they don't have that extra gear, or they're not as good in the passing game. So they slide down a little bit, like an Isaiah Pacheco or something like that. You're going to find guys like that in the fifth and sixth round.
Our needs, other than quarterback, our needs match up with the depth of this draft. So there's a lot of defensive
Agreed.
linemen, there's a lot of edge rushers, there's a lot of interior offensive linemen, and some interesting tight ends. So it matches up pretty well. So I saw a really interesting discussion. I've been watching a lot of draft podcasts lately, and I can't even remember who said what, but one of the interesting discussions was that because this is such a deep group on the defensive line, teams may feel like they can get a good defensive lineman later in the draft.
Mm.
Some of the guys that we think might go higher than they will may start to be there when we pick at 34. So in other words, we might get luck out and somebody might be there that we didn't expect to be there, and we might be able to nab them because teams pass on the. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but
No, it's
that's
a
the kind of thing
possibility.
that does happen when, like you said, if people are afraid there's only so many offensive tackles, they may go early.
Right.
Or if there's so many, let's throw this out, wide receivers or whatever, they may go earlier than they should. But then those defensive linemen get pushed down. Now there may be a run on defensive linemen. We don't know. What we did see last year was there was a run on defensive linemen in the first quarter of the second round. So right before the Giants picked, it seemed there were a lot of defensive linemen that came right off the board. The good news is we're at the top. We're three down. We got the third pick in the second round. So we shouldn't be put in that same situation. We should be able to. There should be a good defensive lineman there. Um, Fingers crossed that that's the route we want to go. Or
And that's a
maybe, like you said, interior offensive
and
lineman.
that's a pretty good spot draft wise because teams who saw something that they couldn't get in the first round might want to move up. There's a possibility that the Giants could trade down in the second round. Somebody wants to jump up and get a guy where we can accumulate picks. Keep in mind, the Giants are probably going to try at some point to grab a pick, even if it's like a second, a third, a fourth next year. They want more picks to have ammunition if they need to move up next year. So a second round drop down is possible for the Giants, considering depending on what they do at the top of one. So
I
that'll
would
be
think
something to
that
watch.
would be more likely if Shane and Dable thought they were coming back for sure, but they might not want to invest.
They might not be making those calls though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That might be a call being made above them.
yeah, possibly. We'll see.
And I think
I
Shane's
think
coming
they're
back unless they fail horribly. I think Shane's coming back, but I do think Dayball is the only one that's on absolute thin ice right now.
probably more likely, but again, I don't know. I don't. They're on the hot seat. I would
Right.
just put
Agreed.
them on. All right, so here it comes, and it's a great question from the Jake on Evan Neal. Does he make a meaningful contribution on the offensive line
Oh
this
boy.
year? Can our offensive line stay healthy enough to gel? That's anyone's guess on that one. There's a couple other questions there too, but let's start with Neal. I think given that they signed two swing tackles in free agency, they re-signed two interior offensive linemen, guards, and Van Roten can also play a little center. So you
And
could,
Stiddy can play center as well.
yeah,
So
I
it's
think so, but I don't think
both
I
can
think it's
play
Van
center.
Roten's more of the
I would
option
agree,
than
but
Stinney.
yes.
And again, remember believe it or
It,
not, they've got four centers on the roster right now. They've got Schlottman and they got two practice squad players they only brought back five practice squad players, and two of them were centers. So um, Evan Neal right now, I before they re-signed the guards, I thought for sure he was moving to guard because they have two new backup tackles. Then they re-signed Van Roten and then they re-signed Stinney. I still am hoping they move Neal to guard and give him just put him at right guard and see if he can grab the bull by the horns and take that position. That's my hope. Um, I don't know if they're counting on him. I don't know what you think, but I don't
I
know if
would
they're
think they're
counting.
not. I would think based on what they've done, they're not counting on him, but they're also, I think they are hoping. They won't pick up the fifth year option. I mean, I'm pretty willing to bet a decent amount on the fact that they're not picking up the fifth year option.
Right.
So he'll be playing this last year out with the rookie tackle contract that he had. They'll move him to guard, and if he makes it, great. If he doesn't, I think you'll see him cut in training camp. If he doesn't, they're not going to carry him if they don't think he can. If he's really just not going to be there, there's no reason to carry him. You might as well just get rid of him.
Right.
But if he can make guard, getting rid of some of those other guys is not a big deal. They brought Stinney back, but it's not a big deal if you cut him in training camp. It's not a big deal if Schlotman gets cut in training camp. So this is Neal's opportunity. He really needs to look at this. This is basically his Eric Flowers moment, except for Flowers had did it when the Giants got rid of him and they went and played guard for somebody else. I'm trying to think. There was another
I think
big
it's more like and you've brought this up multiple times. It's more your
William
William
Roberts. Yeah,
Roberts moment. So is he going to become next William Roberts, or is he off this team?
yeah,
So
yeah.
um, before people start jumping down our necks and say it's already been decided he's moving to guard, I don't know where that story is coming from. It's all over
Right.
the internet. That has not been decided. No one on the Giants, Brian Dable and Joe Shane, even when asked, have
Whoa, whoa,
not
whoa, whoa,
said.
whoa. Hold on. I got to make sure this is true. We have breaking news, bud.
But
I'm double checking to make sure this is true.
wait, yeah, make sure it's
I
an accurate
I am
count.
seeing Russell Wilson going to the Giants.
Oh man, yeah, someone
You
posted it at the
you got
top
it?
of the
Yeah,
thing.
Russell Wilson. All right, so we got something else to talk about then right now.
All right,
I
let me
wish
type while you're talking. I'm gonna type.
I
All
wish
right,
we were live.
we're covering this. All right,
So
this
uh
that doesn't make any sense to me. That
that
does.
came out that kills everything that we said earlier. God damn it.
We're
We literally
covering
explained why
this now
the Giants
on the
obviously
podcast.
got tired of waiting for Aaron Rodgers. I can read to you what I'm seeing as well here as soon as I can find
That
the
doesn't make any sense to me.
this is shocking to me. I am
I think they've created an instant quarterback controversy here.
well, I think for one thing, I mean I agree. I agree, but I think let's see what the deal is priced at. That's going to be the interesting part. And I don't know if you've seen the terms.
No.
Russell Wilson on a 1-year contract. So basically, this is just the Giants have said 1 year, $10.5 million. That's more money than they essentially gave Winston for this year. Winston could earn more, but Wilson's 1 year, 10.5, and his 10.5 is guaranteed with a chance
Wow.
to earn 21 million. That's a contract set for him to be the starter.
Well, yes, it is.
So, wow, here we are. Everything is now changed. Take Aaron Rodgers out of the equation. Rodgers is running out of time. Sounds like he's going to Pittsburgh or wherever he's going. Good luck to you, buddy. So we now have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. I I will say I'm not changing my tune from the other day. I didn't think that would work. They are two completely different quarterbacks in terms of how you're going to run your offense. But the Giants, the rumors were out there, they were going to go veteran, and then that still does not. And what did we say the other day? If the Giants signed Aaron Rodgers, I thought a quarterback at 3 was not going to happen. If they signed any other veteran, they're still in the market possibly for 3. But you know what? It does open the door to move down if they think Jackson Dart is a equal quarterback to Shedeur Sanders. You drop down, you pick up some extra picks, and then you take Dart a little bit lower. So what do you think?
There's a lot to unpack here because there's the how does it impact the draft and how does it impact who starts this year? So where do you want to start first? The draft or
I think let's do it in let's do that actually kind of in backwards thinking. Let's start with the draft and then go from there.
I think this changes the ball game, don't you?
I do. I do.
All right, so first of all, we'll I'm going to admit I was dead wrong about this. I did not see
I thought he
them
was out of the
signing
equation.
both these guys. I did not see this coming. even though people said this was a possibility. I didn't see this. To me, this doesn't make sense given the dynamic about you're going to create a little bit of a quarterback controversy because as soon as Russell Wilson struggles, you're going to have Giants fans out there saying put Jameis in. So that's the bed they. But let's go from there. I just think that with the draft, whoa. So let's take the veto out of the equation because I don't think
Yeah,
there's
he's
yeah, I don't think we should. So you're talking about do you want to spend a third pick overall on a quarterback and also have Jameis and Russell in there? Now, a regular situation, you would say it would not impact it because you would say, well, he's only going to be here 1 year and Jameis is signed for a 2 year contract, and you still need a quarterback of the future. So, geez, John, I don't know. I guess they could still draft the quarterback at 3, but you and I talked about that before that we thought that was less likely. I think this I think this makes it less likely, but I wouldn't rule it out that they still take a quarterback at 3.
I think yeah, I don't think you can say, I mean, because first off, we have no inside knowledge whatsoever. So you can't say, yep, they did this, and that means they're not going to. But it does make the possibilities of other stuff now more likely. What really happens, though, is here's a question. Before I go into all what I'm thinking, I'm going to pose this back to you. Do you think maybe this is a sign that the Giants felt like what you've been saying all along is that maybe Ward and Sanders would go boom, boom, and they would be sitting at 3 and not having.
Possibly. Boy, it makes our opening look like dog shit, right?
Well, I mean, actually, quite
Because
frankly,
we were. I'm
what
sorry.
did I say the last show? I'm sorry, I stepped all over you this
No,
time. That's my bad. I
it's
said the
okay.
last show, have an opinion, but have it be your own. Don't just speak. And that's what we did. But we truly felt like it made almost no sense once you got Winston, why you would get Wilson, who's different. And by the way, why didn't you just sign Wilson
Yeah, but
beforehand?
remember, we also thought, where the heck is Dable? Is he meeting with Rodgers right now? Well,
Now we
see, that didn't happen.
probably know. Maybe he was hanging out with Wilson. I mean, maybe they were going over stuff.
Oh,
The
yeah, maybe
contract
it
would
was
have been done. So we're gonna
nice recovery there, John.
we're gonna take a quick break. We got a guest coming on. We're gonna take a quick break, and
Okay.
then we will be right back. All right, so we are back, and joining us on Inside BBI is Patty Traina, who's been covering the Giants forever. You were a guest with us back on BBI Online Live. Gosh, that was 2009, 2010. We've all been following the Giants for a while. First off, thank you for joining us. And we got some breaking news all of a sudden, just as you were joining.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little piece of trivia for you. You mentioned my being part of the BBI community. Way back when Eric instituted the numbering system, I think I was like 90 something. So I was like one of the first people to sign up for BBI
Wow.
when that registration system went into effect.
Well, it goes even further, but back than that, Patty and I first met on Prodigy.
Yes.
This is when the
Yes.
internet was just sort of taking off, and our old debates, and I think she was on my side. We used to defend Phil Simms versus Jeff Hostetler
Mhm.
when they were
Wow.
trying to decide who should be
Yep.
starting a quarterback. So that's how fun.
Eric's actually my late father loved Eric because he got to meet him at an event that I was at, and Eric came up from Maryland. I think at the time he was leaving there.
Yeah.
And every year, my father would always say, "How's that guy Eric doing?" He
Your
always
father's
asked
great.
about
Yeah,
you.
your father was great. I don't think I knew he passed. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he passed
Okay.
back in 2019.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry to hear that.
thanks.
Okay.
So here we are, Patty. We were going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and whatever. We've got Russell Wilson. Before we talk about Wilson real quick, I just want to ask you if you know. We've been hearing, the Giants contingent down in Miami looking at Cam Ward. There's other piece of the contingent was Bowen and Kafka. They were at Texas. Where's Brian Daboll over these last couple of things and at the pro days? Has he been at any of those?
I don't know which pro days he's been at, but
Right.
I know a lot has been made about Joe Shane being down in Miami. But a little tip that I have learned over the years from covering this team and particularly this regime, usually when they bring a specific position coach down with them, I think in the case of Miami, they brought the tight ends coach. That's usually a hint as to who maybe they're focusing on. I'm not saying
Interesting.
that they didn't focus on Cam Ward. I mean, but everybody seems to think, oh, wow, the Giants are down in Miami. It's Cam Ward, or, oh, they're out in Colorado. It's going to be Shador Sanders. There are other guys that they look at. So sometimes they bring the position coach with them, and that's usually a good indication as to maybe who they might be interested in.
Huh. That is interesting there.
So Patty, all right, so there's a lot to unpack here with this signing, and we're still processing it too. Just as you came on, we just learned. So we're and just to give you a heads up, before they announced it, we just said it doesn't make any sense to sign Russell Wilson, and then they
Looking great.
sign him. So we're debating just now, and again, not to put you on the spot, but on the surface, this seems to suggest that they are less likely to maybe take a quarterback at 3. That's not a given. They still need to get a young guy in the building, and they could certainly do that later in the draft. But are you still like, no, we should get a quarterback at 3, or now are you thinking, hey, maybe they're thinking in second or third round, maybe to bring in somebody?
Yeah, if you'd asked me this a few weeks ago, I would have said quarterback at 3. But lately in my mock drafts, I have gone with Abdul Carter. If Abdul Carter's foot checks out,
Yeah.
that's the guy I think they are going to go with if he is on the board. That's the big, question, if he is on the board. But
Right.
yeah, if you look at the way this quarterback room is now set up, Russell Wilson's on a 1-year deal.
Right.
They got Winston on a 2-year deal. So the way I think it's going to go is, they can afford to now maybe get a quarterback later in the draft. Because, the word of the combine was, and not just from the Giants, just the word in general is that this quarterback class it's not really the best quarterback
Right.
class to when you need a quarterback. You probably want to wait till next year. So if you're looking for a franchise guy, that's not to say you can't get one in this class. I mean, there's been, Tom Brady, remember he was what, a
Right.
6th-round pick?
6th round.
The GOAT,
Yeah.
But the feeling that I get is that, they will take a guy just to kind of get him on board, because I don't know if Tommy DeVito has a long-term future with this team. Nice guy, works his butt off. I don't know if he's going to have a long-term future, but get a guy in here, start developing him, see what you've got, and then reassess. And then if you find that this guy maybe is the answer, then you stick with him next year. And you have Winston as your backup, because Winston's coming in on a relatively cheap deal. And Russell's only
Right.
here on a 1-year deal. So if you follow the clues, the breadcrumbs, you kind of see what the Giants are hoping to do.
So do you think if before we got Wilson, were the Giants as heavily invested in Shador as it seemed on the surface? Or was in the building, if you've heard anything, where did they kind of rank Ward and Sanders and maybe even a Jackson Dart?
Yeah, from what I understand, and again, the feeling coming out of the combine was that Ward, hands down, I think if you asked any team or anybody associated with any team or any reporters that covered any team, that Ward was the number 1 guy. Sanders, you got kind of a mixed feeling. Some people felt that he was top 3. Some people felt that he was mid round of the first round. And I actually, talked to a couple of people who felt that he wasn't even a first round pick, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think he is a first rounder, but so yeah, I get the feeling, Ward, obviously, there was talk earlier in the month, or last month, I should say, about the Giants maybe trading up, but the Titans just want really an obnoxious trade package.
Right.
The Giants are not in a position to give up probably what the Titans are looking for, which is multiple first-round picks.
Right.
So you stay put at 3, or now if the Giants wanted, they could even trade down a few picks, which I had kind of been banging the table for. As much as I would love Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, even if he's sitting there, if you can trade down a few picks with somebody who maybe wants Shador Sanders, has him higher on their board, pick up some extra draft capital. Now you're going to have capital for 2026 if you have to trade up. Because remember, the Giants have signed a ton of free agents this year. They are probably not going to get comp picks next year. So why not pick up some additional draft assets if you can?
Right. So I just want to go back a little bit here, because you have the great opportunity to interact with the coaching staff on a regular basis during the season. You're always sitting in on the media events, and every couple of weeks they'll roll out the position coaches and all that. It seemed, and then of course you're talking to other reporters when you're waiting for them to come in the room, and I'm sure you guys are sort of discussing work with the Giants and what's going on. There seemed to be a vibe late in the year from Dan Duggan, from Pat Leonard, from Art. It seemed like, at least it was coming across on Twitter, that they didn't think Brian was coming back. And then something switched towards the end. Again, John's going to hate that I'm bringing up the
Jesus,
Colts
here we
game,
go.
but no, I'm not going to get into the Colts game. But did you pick up a vibe that things had changed, or were you always thinking Brian was coming back? Or did you think that there's something happened there that all of a sudden it seemed like he wasn't and then he was?
There was a time that I didn't think Brian would be back, but then towards the end there, I think the Colts game really helped them. There were also flashes towards the end there where the team, the team never gave up,
Mhm.
despite how bad they looked, they kept fighting for him. And I think that certainly helped him. But, I know for the longest time, there was this feeling that, oh, if Brian goes, Joe has to go because they're a pair. Well, they're not a pair.
Mm.
And I don't think that, John Mara, Steve Tisch would have thought twice about it to say, okay, you know what, Brian, you're out, but we're going to keep Joe. It's not the ideal situation since they both came in together and you wanted ideally have your GM and head coach on the same timeline, but it would have happened if they had continued to really, fall apart. But the Colts game, I think, is where it really, Brian was able, and I'm just, speculating on what he said to John Mara because I wasn't in the room, obviously, but
Right.
he probably went to him and said, "You see what happens when I have good quarterback play? You see what we can do,
Right.
So let's get this quarterback situation fixed." Because remember, at that point, they didn't have Daniel Jones; they had moved on from him. They were trying to decide Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle. They were going back and forth because of injuries and performance issues. But when Drew Lock had that career game, Brian was able to say, "Hey, look, now I've got some ammunition in my bows, arrows in my quiver.
Right.
So
Right.
now I can say, look, see what happens. We have a good quarterback play. You get me a good quarterback. This is what we're capable of doing."
Right. Did he seem worn down to you as the season progressed, or was he the same as he always was?
He
Because we've
was,
gotten.
yeah,
Oh,
he
sorry.
was subdued. I thought,
Okay.
Yeah.
in the past, you know, going back to last year, Brian was kind of edgy and on, but I suspect calling the plays had a lot to do with that. I mean, it's an observation I know a lot of us made going back to the summertime, where we felt that Brian Dable was less of a yeller and a screamer, at least from what we saw. We don't know how he was behind, closed doors, but he was just so engrossed with the offense, and I just felt like that kind of mellowed him out a little bit.
Mm.
Looking back on last year, which there's not a whole lot to look back on, but early on in the season, it certainly seemed like press conference after press conference after press conference after each loss that Dayball seemed very resigned to, even though he knew the guy that they're putting out there just is not getting it done, but kept sticking to the point of, well, he gives us the best chance to win. Was that kind of a message, do you think, kind of sending that back to ownership? Like, you stuck me with this. This is the best I got. This is what we get. Because it kind of felt like it was really odd the way his demeanor was about that. Because if you take the Hard Knocks thing kind of in a capsule, and then a lot of it is entertainment, but they did catch a lot of talk where you were really talking badly about your current situation and all the guys you really wanted to have at quarterback. So again, looking back, was that Dayball's kind of response to maybe Mara and above him, Shane and Mara? This is what we get when you stick me with this guy.
Yeah, I think it could certainly be part of it. I mean, you're right. It played out on Hard Knocks, and quite honestly, I was surprised that they let that play out on Hard
Right.
Knocks because it just right away it sent a bad message, I think, across the board. And it's funny because if you remember at the end of the 2023 season, they were saying, Daniel's our guy. If he's healthy, he's our guy.
Right.
And I kept thinking to myself, why are you saying that now? You don't know what the draft is going to bring. You don't know what free agency is going to bring. You don't even know if Daniel's going to be healthy. So I thought that, the fact that they were saying that, and I kind of understand why they were maybe sending a message to Daniel, don't worry, we got you back. But as it's began to play out, and I saw that, I remember asking somebody saying, look, you guys are sending mixed messages. You're telling us and the world, Daniel's your guy, regardless if he's healthy. Meanwhile, you're flirting with Russell Wilson. If you remember towards,
Yes. Yep.
last year, you talked about potentially, trading up with the Patriots to get Drake May. You talked about how you would trade up to get Jane Daniels. Mixed messages. I mean, that's how I saw it. I don't know if that's how
Yes.
you guys saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Agreed.
like, okay, so what was the deal there? And the answer I got back was, well, we weren't sure if Daniel was going to be okay, so we had to protect ourselves. Well, all right, I understand that, but who protects themselves by wanting to trade assets to move up in the draft to get a guy? Usually you
Right.
just get like a, for lack of a better, description here, a Jameis Winston to come in on a 2-year cheap deal to
Right.
protect yourself until you can, I mean, that's how I saw it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know we're going to keep it really tight, so we got just a few more minutes for you because you've got breaking news you got to go deal with. Based on where we are right now, I had been saying if the Giants did get Rodgers, I expected that they might then go after another, whether it be a trade or a different free agent, maybe another playmaker, because at that point you're loading up for the guy there. Russell Wilson's a little bit of a different scenario here. We're talking maybe a step back, although again, we're talking guys who are kind of up in age for football players. Do you expect the Giants to make any other moves free agency wise, or should we pretty much say this is probably done? Maybe a spot signing, but nothing major, or could they be in the market to bring another playmaker in to give Wilson a little help?
I don't think you rule it out, but I would think right now maybe they're done for the time being. Let's see what the draft brings. I'm sure guys are going to get cut. Once the draft is over, guys will be released. June 1st is coming up. That's a key day for, as you know, on the
Right.
NFL calendar for salary cap purposes. So I wouldn't rule it out. Certainly they're always on the lookout for additional talent. So I do think though the addition of Russell Wilson might just take quarterback out of the picture at number 3, though. I'm fairly confident in saying.
We just had we were having a discussion before you came on, so I'm curious if you've heard this. There's a lot of talk that people keep saying that it's been stated by the Giants that Evan Neal is going to guard. Have you heard them definitively say they're moving him to guard, or that it's just kind of something they're thinking about doing?
They haven't come right out and said we are definitely moving him. But if you go back to the end of last year, I think it was the very last media session with the assistant coaches. Carmen Brasillo kind of hedged a little bit. Brian Dable kind of hedged a little bit. And sometimes you've got to really listen to how they word it. When they say he's a tackle for now, that
Right.
to me, and I've learned this with this organization, when they say for now, as in that moment, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the case next week or next year. For now, if they just said he's a tackle, end of story. So the devil's in the details as far as the verbiage and the context. I do think that Evan Neal is going to move to guard, and I'll tell you why I think that. And I've thought this last year. The Giants just went out and they brought in 2 offensive tackles to presumably be the swing guys, James
Right.
Hudson III and Stone Forsythe. So Jermaine Illuminor, you figure he's going to be the right tackle. Andrew Thomas is going to be the left tackle. Where do you put Evan Neal? If you're trying to salvage him, if you're trying to say, okay, look, this is the 7th overall pick for a few years ago, we've got to salvage him. And after seeing how the Eagles had success salvaging Mekhi Becton by moving him inside, I mean, I think all signs are pointing to it being a given.
It's a guarantee, I would say, that they're not going to pick up the 5th-year option on his contract.
I doubt it. I mean, they've got to decide on Thibodeau's as well. I think his gets picked up, although I'm not sure, about his long-term future with the team. I mean, he's been okay for them, and I know he's had some injury issues, but he's a guy that I think maybe the people were expecting a little bit more from him. So we'll see how he does, but I do think they'll pick up his option. I do not think they will pick up Evan Neal's.
Would you say it's a fair, I don't want to say a guess, but a fair statement that if the Giants drag out because they have time. They don't have to do it until I think it's early May. That if they don't pick up Thibodeau's 5th year until after the draft, and if the Giants pull in Abdul Carter, they're not under any pressure now to do that. They literally, if they don't really feel like he's the guy, they could not do it. Do you see any possibility that if Carter's your guy, is there a possibility they don't snag that 5th year with him? Because then you could move him in a trade earlier in the season if you wanted to go that route.
No, I think you have to pick it up. And here's why, because if you do want to move him in a trade, say this year, now you tell the potential acquiring team, hey, you're not just going to have him for a 6-month rent or 6-week rental.
Right.
You're going to have him for a 6-week plus a year. So I think it does make sense to do that. And also, I'll point to this, and people, they slam me for being nostalgic, but I think you guys will appreciate this. Go back and look at the 2007 defense and the 2011 defense.
Oh, sure.
They were 3 deep minimum at
yeah.
pass rusher on the edges.
Yep.
All right. So I can't see any reason why they would not pick up Thibodeau's option year. I mean, unless he did something really, really stupid, and I don't think he would do that. So.
Well, then there's the optics too, that you would not pick up the option on both your top 7.
Yeah,
that would look really bad. So yeah, that's another factor. So
Patty,
I know before you go. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Do your.
I was just saying, because I know you got to go. Is there anything down? And this is going to open-ended question. If you don't have anything, let me know. But since you've got to run, is there anything sort of down the stretch that you feel like isn't getting talked about enough from the locker room point of view, that maybe a dissatisfied players, or they're more optimistic than we think they are, they're more pessimistic? Did you pick up any vibe from the players that you were interacting with, or it's everything's so scripted now with your access to the players you can't really pick that up?
Well, we haven't been back in the building since the end of
No, I mean like before the season ended. So down the stretch when everything was kind of going haywire.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you kind of sort of like the players are really down, or they think this was a better team than they showed, or and if there's nothing there, just say there was nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were disappointed because I think they all felt that they were better than a 3-win team. I know there was a lot of frustration, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. You saw it with the play of certain guys that, they were struggling with this system. But I also think that there was some optimism, even though the season ended, and let's face it took its toll on not just those guys. I'm sure it took a toll on you guys. I know it took a toll on me. It was just a long, exhausting season. But I think there was some hope, some optimism that year 2 in being in Shane Bowen's system. And quite honestly, I was shocked that Shane wasn't dismissed, but he's back
agreed.
Year 2. There's hope that now they will maybe gel a little bit better and perform better, because you guys know, I don't have to tell you who kind of fell off a little bit in the defense,
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
We saw it. So,
Yeah.
so, there's hope that, the defensive secondary, they have the new coach. They've
Right.
brought guys in who can who can play either type of coverage scheme in the defensive secondary. I think, the linebackers, which, had some struggles there. Bobby Okereke, he didn't suddenly get bad, folks. He didn't suddenly fall off of a cliff. It was a change in what he was being asked to do. And, one of the reasons why I was kind of banging the table for Shane Bowen to be fired, and forgive me for banging the table for anybody to be fired these times, but I felt like he wasn't adapting to what he had as well as he could have. I'm hoping this year that changes, because if you're going to insist on asking a guy who is a great press corner to continue playing, zone coverage, and he's just not getting it, then what are we doing here?
Right.
And they brought in another press cover guy in a Debo too. So
right,
exactly.
But he has some. I think he's got a little bit more experience with zone.
But he loves press.
Right.
That's his preference. Yeah.
So before you go, because I know you got to go. Let everybody know where they can follow you on X and follow you online, and your podcast. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Right. Thank you for having me. It was great seeing you guys, by the way. And a big shout out to all the BBI folks. Miss you guys. I don't get to see y'all that often because they keep me very busy. But
we'll have you come back on when there's not breaking news.
Yeah, of course. I'd be happy to. You can find the written work on New York Giants on SI. We're part of the Sports Illustrated Media Group. So it's New York Giants on SI. My podcast is Locked On Giants, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network and also part of the Tegna TV radio network. So you can find us on Amazon and I think on Fire and all that stuff.
Nice.
Also on social media, I'm on X at Patricia_Traina. I'm on Threads at Patty Traina, and Blue Sky. I think I'm
Wow.
at Patricia
Yeah.
Traina.
All right.
I'm
All
all
right.
over the place on
All
social
over the place.
media.
Well, I know
All right,
you got
thank
some breaking news to cover, so we're gonna let you go. But we really appreciate you coming on. We'll catch back
Thank
up
you,
with you
Patty.
again, and it was great once again. It's been a long time, but we'll make sure that it's not as long this time.
Yes.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, well, we're back. That was awesome. It was great catching up with Patty. It's been a long time. I'm glad she remembers it with us. And of course, she remembers stuff with you. That's great. I just
I'm not that old. I still can
no,
remember
no.
things.
I didn't say you were like decrepit. I'm just saying that it's, we all have lives and other stuff have happened,
Yeah.
but it immediately brought back memories of for me, just of when we would have the different, we'd have Patty, we had Mike Garofalo would come on. I believe we had Schwartz that came on. We definitely had Vacchiano came on a number of times.
Yeah. We had Tom Rock came on.
Yeah,
We had a
Tom
lot.
Rock. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just
Mike Garofalo
came on
Yeah.
often. I
Yeah.
used to just mess and be like, dude, are you
Yeah.
available? So
Yeah.
it was nice catching up with her, but here yes, we will fully admit we started the show by going, why Russell Wilson was not going to be signed.
We look bad. The asshats look bad. The what else we were talking about? We were talking about it didn't make sense from a quarterback controversy standpoint.
Would they
Everything
sign
looked
Rodgers?
bad. It looked
Not.
bad.
Maybe it'll be Flacco. Who knows?
We got a lot to digest. We probably should do another show on this soon because
will.
I've
We
got to
will.
think about this because this is going to impact a lot. Could impact. The big question here, John, before we get off, and again, I've got to digest this. What does this mean, if anything, for the third pick in the draft? Does this mean QB is off the table or not? Now, in a regular, normal situation, you'd probably say not, because again, Wilson's only a 1-year deal. He's older.
Winston's
He's nearing the
2.
end. And you're right. Winston's
Winston's a
2.
2.
Winston's 2. And again, now this tells us Wilson's the starter. But what if this is the problem? What if we get to the preseason and Winston is clearly the better quarterback over Wilson in this system? What if that I think that's possible. I think
It's definitely possible, but when you look at it, what you just said to start with it though is the first part that is potentially troublesome for the Giants. You just signed Wilson, even though it was 1 year. You signed him to $10 million guaranteed with the ability to make 21. So that's incentive based. So they did build a lot of incentives in there in a single year contract. But still, you give Winston 8 essentially. You're giving Wilson 10 guaranteed plus incentives. That means you kind of expect him to be the starter. Winston's ability to earn more money, which I believe doubles the contract from 8 to 16, but that's over 2 years.
Right.
So the Giants they've done all of this with the idea that, yeah, Wilson's probably the starter. Winston's probably the backup. And I do think we're getting a quarterback. 3 is in question. If it's Sanders, you could go down to, if he's still sitting there, you could drop down depending on who else is available. If Hunter's available, I think a Jacksonville is going to want to jump New England and get Hunter.
Well, let me put
That's
this
as
out
low
there.
as I would go.
Let me
is
put
5.
this out there too. There was a discussion I saw today. I think it was on ESPN, but I'm not sure. I watched so many clips today, I don't remember where it was. If Wilson got by quarterbacks all over the break. If Shedeur Sanders gets by the Giants, how far does he drop?
That's a good point.
That was a conversation that they were having, and it's not a given that Sanders might drop a while, and it's not because he's not good. But there are questions about him that, and again, I'm more of a Shedeur guy than most people are, but there are questions that he doesn't have the ideal traits, and does he drop farther than you would think he would? We've all seen it. We've all seen quarterbacks that lasted way farther than they should have once they got past certain teams. So if Shedeur drops enough, does he drop far enough for the Giants to get back in the range to trade up and get him? That would be actually kind of the perfect draft is maybe they trade down or stay where they are, but Shador then drops so far down that maybe the Giants get a second shot at him. I know that's
I
pie
would
in the sky. I know
no
that's
no
pie in
I,
the sky, but
there's been a lot of talk of that. The one team that I think you got to watch for first is Pittsburgh, obviously, because they need
oh
a
sure,
quarterback, but they're a little bit they're a little further down. So come up a little bit higher. San Francisco becomes an interesting position because they're debating how much money they're going to give Brock Purdy.
right.
And Brock Purdy's not exactly an athlete that's going to set the world on fire. He doesn't have plus size. He doesn't have plus arm. He was a late draft pick. But a Shedeur Sanders in a in a Shanahan offense, that's intriguing. So I would be very careful on the Giants if I think he's going to drop. 11 would worry me. So you would have to kind of think somewhere in that range that either San Francisco or somebody else comes to San Francisco's spot who might be way further down. But San
Right.
Francisco's a team that they sneakily need a quarterback right now because Purdy wants a lot. And I don't know that they want to give him that. They don't have to do anything with him. They could ride out this year with what they have and force his hand. So
Okay.
we'll see. That's just a thought. But I think you're onto something. That's why I don't know if I drop down further than 5. If I wanted Sanders for sure.
No, what I'm saying is maybe you can take another player.
Right. I
And
understand
then
what you're saying.
Sanders still may be there later on, and maybe you trade back up for him somehow. All right,
But a Jackson Dart
talk.
suddenly becomes a target later in the first round now for the Giants if that's what they want.
And he might not get past teams like the Raiders and the Saints or you don't know, even guys that you think are set at quarterback. Like no one thought Atlanta was going to get a quarterback last year, and they drafted a quarterback. So you just don't know.
Right.
So Ryan Dunleavy's reporting that if he made his max, which is 21 million, which you just talked about, it would make him the 20th highest paid QB in the NFL. Again, he's got to reach the max. So obviously the contract is structured in such a way that it looks like he would be the starter going into camp. However, this is my question to you. Since we're 0 for whatever on this episode, let's keep it going. Do you think they say there's an open competition?
Boy, the contract says you're not going to do that, but smartly,
would you do it?
But
I'd
smartly, I would say yes, because first off, you're guaranteed 10 million. If I pay you 10 million for being a backup, be a backup. You want the job, win it. So
that's my attitude.
Yes.
Win the job.
So yes.
Win the job. But boy, John, I tell you what, it's kind of what I said early in the episode, though. If they make him the starter without him earning it and he doesn't play well, you are going to see calls for Jameis to come in the game. Brian Dable's in a bad situation here.
Do you remember John Madden? Remember John Madden years ago? His big statement was
if you have two
quarterbacks, you don't have one.
You don't have one. And that's exactly I actually was thinking that
Yeah.
you and great minds think alike. I was actually thinking about that the same as you were saying that. So now what the ideal situation is if Wilson comes in and he's clearly better and he plays great football. I'm not expecting that. I will end with this and saying, because I got to digest this, that with both of these guys, I think the deep ball is back in the Giants arsenal because both these guys like to throw the ball deep. So between the two of them, Hyatt, Neighbors, Slayton are going to like this. I'm not so sure how this is going to help Wandell. We'll see.
It's funny you just said that because I was just thinking that I will not be surprised if in the draft we get a receiver who's 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", to give us a guy because Wilson's always had a taller guy. He had Metcalf was a taller guy. I'm trying to think. The other receivers weren't that small for Seattle. Winston's had some bigger receivers down the field kind of guys. Wandell is the intermediary crossing little guy. He might not fit what your quarterbacks can do.
And believe it or not, Sean Payton played Little Jordan Humphrey. I can't get over that name. Little Jordan sounds like a cartoon character.
I know.
Little Jordan Humphrey played in the slot as a really big receiver. He doesn't look like the kind of guy you'd expect to be playing in the slot, but he was a slot guy. So maybe they'd make Wandale more of a gadget guy than I don't know. We'll have to see. There's a lot to digest here. I did not expect this. I thought maybe Flacco, but I didn't expect Wilson. And again, my gut reaction is that they might have a quarterback controversy on their hands at some point.
Does this also indicate that maybe Rodgers told the Giants, I'm out?
That's a great question. Well, something happened. Either the Giants were done waiting.
Because why? Yeah, why? Because the Steelers are still waiting. Why wouldn't you keep waiting unless you knew he's not coming? He said he's not coming, and they immediately pivoted to
Well, he either
Wilson.
said that he's not coming, or they got
Or they
tired.
drew a line in the sand, like I was saying. They said, listen, we got to know by this date, or we got to make a move. And even if they just did that internally with themselves, hey, if we don't hear from him by this point, we go Wilson and we move forward.
Well, I'm going to go on record and I'm going to say I don't like this signing. I don't like it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about this one. I've not been a Russell Wilson fan since his last couple years in Seattle.
Yeah.
And nothing he's done on the field has changed my mind on that. He had a little bit of a renaissance in Pittsburgh, but then he faded again at the end. And he just doesn't look like the same quarterback he was. Well, and here we go. Paul Schwartz. Everything we reported in the first half is, remember what Paul Schwartz said? Not a good fit in the locker room. Well, he got that from the Giants, right? He said the Giants believe that Winston.
I wonder. You said he's a potential mouthpiece for the Giants. What if you had given him an offer that he had not signed yet, that he had not accepted, and you're like, you know what? We're not giving you more money. So just kind of leak it out there that we're not interested, that the Giants might not be. You don't have to come from the Giants, right? But somebody else says, word is that you might not be that good in the locker room.
Yeah.
And now you negotiate. Now you negotiate. It's very weird, but I'm gonna now do something. I can't believe I'm gonna do it. I think they won't go quarterback at 3. I just don't think they will now. But I do think watch out for the Giants to get Jalen Milroe. We have 2 quarterbacks that are not runners. Wilson moves around, but he is not a runner. And in fact, he doesn't even move around like he used to. Winston is purely not a runner at all. We will have a running quarterback to run specific plays, and I think is Jalen Milroe.
I think boy, I think Giants fans, for better or worse, are going to have to get prepared for what they're probably going to draft Hunter or Carter.
That seems likely now. And but by the way, they're the 2 best players in the draft.
No.
I agree. I'm with you. I'm just saying,
remember the first thing I said when we talked about they're not in a terrible position because they're going to get either Shador or Carter or Hunter.
Or somebody offers a lot to get one of those guys.
I'm guessing they don't trade down. It would have to be a heck of an offer, and I don't see teams trading up a ton. I mean, it would have to be like New England.
If someone gave you a 1 next year,
you
would take that deal.
Yeah, because they need a quarterback, and
you need to load up for next year.
So like, say New England's desperate, even just to go up 1 spot and get Hunter.
They won't give up a 1 to move 1.
I don't think they'd give up a 1 for that, but
Jacksonville from 5 to 3.
But remember, New England is going to want. You know those situations where we were like, why the hell did the Giants give up a draft pick to trade up 1 spot? They did that with Banks. They did that with Banks, right?
They did that with Jeremy Shockey,
right?
Whose jersey I'm wearing.
This is a situation right now where New England's not really happy because they saw Hunter maybe falling into their laps, and now it may not be happening. And New England may actually give up more than they would want to give up. So before, Hunter could have dropped right into their lap. Now there's a really good chance Hunter's not going to be there. So if Cleveland takes Shador, they're breathing a sigh of relief because they'll get either Hunter or Carter. And I think they want Hunter. And Giants probably would take Carter, but I heard that they loved Hunter at the combine. I don't know if that means he's higher on the board. It just means they like his personality. New England's got to be sweating bullets though if Cleveland takes Carter, Because the Giants at that point will either trade down or they'll take Hunter. So even New England might trade up one spot and give away like their second round pick. I assume they still have their second round pick, but their second round pick at the top of the second round, if they still have that, right? I don't have I
I
don't
don't have it up, but I
but I'm
believe so.
assuming
Yes.
that's there. So we might even be able to drop, but then you lose Hunter. So my guess is the Giants will draft Carter or Hunter at this point, unless somebody blows them away with a trade. Boy, there's a lot to digest here, though.
Yeah. So we'll do another show this week.
Yeah.
We'll do it live. I wish we had been live on, and now I'm really wishing we had done live on this one.
I wish I had announced this a half hour later than
right, or earlier before we started talking. So,
on an inside BBI where they always get it wrong.
hey, listen, I'll say this. We said nothing different than what we said before. And we
Right.
said nothing different than what most people were already saying, that Wilson was pretty much out of the equation for the Giants. And it seemed to make sense. This is a weird coupling. Wilson and Winston is an odd, I mean, not only is it a competition, I mean, literally it's a competition alphabetically of which one you're going to list. It's okay, Wilson, Winston,
Right.
you don't even know who's going to be the starter other than the contracts, the way they're designed seems like Wilson, but again, earn it on the field. But it does open up so much stuff for the draft now. One
So
thing
when they sat down with John Mara at the end of the year and they said there was a plan, was this the what's this the plan?
I'm sure it was page 11 of the contingency part.
This is the plan? Oh my
If we
God.
don't get
Oh.
this guy, we're going to pivot to here. And then if
I
we
don't like this. I don't like
then
this.
we'll
I
go
got to think
back
about
to
it
the
more, but
guy
I
that
don't
we
like
turned
this.
down.
I
So-
don't know. I don't think I have a good feeling that this works out well for them. But if you don't like Dable, and you end up getting Carter or Hunter, then you're all right because the next coaching staff will have them and you didn't stick them with a quarterback.
But a safe thing to say, I'll say this. I know you don't like it, and I'm not a fan of Wilson, so I'm not going to pretend like I like it. But I'll say this. We have the best quarterback room we've had in years. And that's
A lot
sad.
of experience. If you add up all the yards these two have thrown and all the touchdown passes these people have thrown,
Well,
yeah, it's
Wilson's played in multiple Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Multiple Super Bowls.
Yeah.
He was a winning quarterback. Does he still have it? I don't know.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't.
If you
We've
can,
seen enough
I
of-
agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But if they think they can mask some of the things, and they just want a guy who picks the right player to throw to, then we're going to be scheming things open.
You could sell me on Brian Dable, perfect ideal situation, not likely to happen, but you could sell me 4 or 5 beers in. You could sell me on Dable maybe having a Sean Payton like impact on Winston and him having a career renaissance here. You can't sell me on Wilson becoming something than he's been the last few years because I think that's father time catching up with him. So Winston still is a relatively young 31-year-old quarterback.
Sure.
Wilson's not that. And I I just have a hard time. Let's hope for the best though. We're a Giants show. Let's hope for the best. But you're right. I mean, they're better than what we've had.
Right.
Oh.
Right. So we're going to wrap it up because that's one of the things that we're not great about doing is wrapping it up when we want to wrap it up. Thank you to Patty Traina for coming on. I will link a bunch of her stuff in the description. Please take a moment to follow her. Real quick, we will be guesting. Eric, you want to let people know we're going to be guesting on somebody else's show in early April.
Oh yeah, we're going back on New York Rush is pop, but that's not till April 9th. So we'll
early April.
We'll promo that as we get closer, but we're going to talk draft with those guys on sleepers or sleeper picks for the draft. I think they're feeding us names though, and they want our reaction to it. So
we'll see. And we got our own stuff. We will be doing a mock draft. I know Eric can't wait. He's just so excited.
Oh, I have a better idea on the mock draft. I don't know if you want me to announce it here or online.
Well, you can tell me your better idea. I still like the mock draft.
I think more interesting than having us go through an entire first round, and because I don't think Giants fans would be interested in who Eric thinks the Seattle Seahawks will take with their first round pick or anything like that. What I was thinking about is us going through scenarios when the Giants are on the clock with which players are still there. Who would you take and who would I take? So in other words,
Sure.
but first round, second round, third round, and we
Okay.
could get and then sort of say where would you go, what position would you go, and why, and but different scenarios. So for
Okay.
instance, if Carter's not on the board and we're picking at 3, what would you do? That kind of thing. So, and if we get to the second round and these players are there, what would you do in the second round? So that was
All
my
right.
that was
No,
my
that works. I know. And I know.
I just don't
and
know if people will be interested in who we think San Francisco's taking. I mean, that's just anyway. That's me.
every mock draft works out that way. We'll talk about it for a lot, but we'll do your thing first. We'll just do it your way. No, we'll do your thing first.
I'm
and
just
then,
here for the
no, I
ride.
like it.
If
It's
you want to
interesting.
do it,
It's interesting. That's an interesting thought. We'll run with that. So yeah, so we got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of draft stuff. I started to tell you before we got on the show, so I'm going to tell you real quick. You know how I've brought up multiple times even the beer part of it. I said, I watch these guys so bad it's good. They do the beer thing. They introduce their beers before him, where they break down like a bad movie. They watch the bad movie, and I told you about that. So the main guy on that is Jason Brandt. He's an author as well, and and his wife Erin does that. Well, I was on a live video with them. They were doing and I was chatting with them, and I asked them to be guests on our show. They said they would be happy to, so I'm reaching out to get them on. These
to talk
guys,
movies.
well, what we could do, I think what we'll do is I'm trying to figure out what's best. They're Steelers fans. They had Ben Roethlisberger come on and do a bad movie thing with them. It was in their house. It was awesome. But I want to just talk. We'll talk some movie stuff, some football tie-ins to that. But I thought it'd be kind of fun, kind of an NFT version of Inside BBI, because we'd have that on BigBlueInteractive.com, non-football threads for those of you who don't know. But I think it'd be a great tie-in.
Sure.
They've got a humongous audience. It would be awesome to have them on.
We could make fun of them about getting Aaron Rodgers, and they can make fun of us about getting
anybody.
Russell Wilson.
Daniel
or
Jones,
anything.
Tommy DeVito, whatever. So I'll end it there. I am working still on that other one that I hinted at, and people were way off in their guesses of who I was talking about. But that's okay. I don't want to say it because I don't want to jinx it, because we're not close enough for me to say it's a definite. But you'll be thrilled if I can get.
You gotta stop doing that, because you're jinxing it. You're jinxing
I didn't jinx it. I'm already saying I don't know if it will happen. I'm just saying, when we're a lot closer,
so you don't want me to make.
I do not want you to say anything about. No, I do not. So
one of my favorite quotes.
No,
shut I'll give it away. All right. On that note,
we're going to close it up. Like, subscribe, comment, please. It's been going great. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers. So
we need 6 more people. 6.
Come on,
Give
do
us
it.
6.
Do it. All right. We'll catch you again real soon.